today's message.
To you, and I want you to think about what is the main difference between a believer in Jesus Christ and a non-believer. What's the main difference? And let me give you the answer. It is that a believer has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Is that right? That would be probably the major difference. An unbeliever does not have a relationship with Jesus. A believer in Jesus has a personal relationship with Jesus. Okay, it's hard for me to believe that personal relationship does not include communication. And yet there are entire persuasions of theological thought that God doesn't speak anymore. And that, to me, is crazy to think that way. That he spoke for 4,000 years, and we have a record of him speaking to person after person after person in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and then all of a sudden, after the first century, he just got laryngitis, or he's just bursting up there because he hasn't talked to humans in over 1,900 years. It's just crazy to think that way. If you are praying about a new job and an unbeliever is praying or thinking about, I should say that way, a new job, is there any difference in the way these two people are going to approach the situation? Of course there is. Because the unbeliever gathers facts and tries to make the best decision he can, but the believer gathers facts and asks God what his will is. And God can lead you. And wouldn't you rather make decisions based on God's knowledge than on yours? Because God knows if the company interviewing you is going to go out of business in a year. God knows if it's going to be relocated to Fairbanks, Alaska. And nothing against Fairbanks, Alaska, if you're watching from Fairbanks. But God knows. But if you have a thought that God doesn't speak anymore, I really don't mean this condescending. I mean it the way I'm saying it. I feel so sorry for you. That you have a personal relationship with someone who never speaks to you. I don't know how personal that is. So God speaks, and we'll cover that in the series. But I want to show you some things about God, and we'll just build on the thought every week, all right? Let me make this statement to start the series. Hearing God is not something you do. It's someone you are. And if you don't understand that, you may not understand the concept of hearing God. So it's not something you do. It's someone you are. So here's the title of the first message, and granted it's a little different, but the title is, I'm a sheep. Just say that out loud. Say, why don't you turn to the person beside you and say, I'm a sheep.
I'm a sheep.
Now you can turn to the person who said it to you and say, so that's what I smell. Okay. Okay, John chapter 10, Jesus is contrasting himself as the good shepherd with the thief, the robber, who is Satan. All right? So John chapter 10, look at verse 1. We're talking about we're sheep and we can hear God. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens. Now watch this carefully. And the sheep, watch, hear his voice. Can you just say those three words? Hear his voice. It does not say sense his impressions. And I'm not saying that God doesn't give us impressions. I just simply am literally blown away. And when I say that, again, I'm not saying condescendingly, because I used to be of the theological persuasion that believed that God didn't speak anymore. And I'm shocked that I could have ever believed that. That he's just has chosen not to speak anymore since he wrote us a letter. And we have his word, but now he doesn't communicate personally to his children. I'm just shocked that I could have ever thought that way. Hear his voice. That's the Bible. His sheep hear his voice. And he calls, so the way you call is your voice, his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know what? His voice. And if you have any doubt that this is talking about Jesus, verse 11, he says, I am the good shepherd. So Jesus said, we know it, but just in case you have doubt, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. Now look at verse 16. John 10:16. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Now look at me just for a moment. We talked last week about to the Jew first. He is now speaking about the Gentiles. He's talking to Jewish people, and he says, and you need to know, there are other sheep I have that are not of this fold. Other sheep. There's not a theologian I've ever met in the world that doesn't know or believe this is talking about Gentiles. So that's most of us. You might be Jewish, but for the rest of us, thank God that he had another fold. Okay? The Gentiles. Now watch this. Other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring. Watch. And they will, what? Hear my voice. Okay, I can hear God. That's what he's saying specifically. They will hear my voice. And there will be one flock and one shepherd. He's speaking of Jew and Gentile here. One flock. And then verse 27, just to make it really, really clear. John 10:27. My sheep, say those three words, hear my voice. And I know them, and they follow me. Okay, let me ask you a very simple question. Is Jesus the shepherd? Okay, are you following him? So then you're the sheep. And what do sheep do? They hear his voice. This is in red. This is Jesus. I don't really care what Dr. Fuzzy Face says. I care what this book says. It's clear, my sheep hear my voice. So let me tell you three things about the ability to hear God. All right, here's number one. It's innate. It's innate. In other words, you're born with it. It's inherent. It's natural. It's built in. It's instinct. He said, my sheep hear my voice. When you're born again a child of God. He's the shepherd. You're his sheep. Sheep have the ability to hear the shepherd. And this is what makes us different. Even though he's comparing us to sheep now, as human beings, we were created in the image of God, and our God is a communicative God. Our God is a speaking God. The whole reason that you have the ability to hear and speak is because you were created in the image of a hearing, speaking God. Why would he create you with the ability to communicate and then not communicate with you? This is what separates us from the animals. That God gave us the ability to communicate our deepest feelings, not only to other humans, but to him. And he communicates to us. And I know some say, well, animals can communicate. Yes, they can on some level. I understand that. But they can't communicate like we can. I know we all love animals, but I'm just telling you, they were not created in the image of God. But you were. And you were created in the image of a speaking God. And he created you with the ability to hear him because he says very clearly, I am the good shepherd and my sheep hear my voice. It's innate. You're born with the ability to hear God. Here's the second thing. It's learned. Now you might say, well, that's kind of a contrasting thought. You're saying I'm born with it, but you're saying I need to learn how to hear God. Absolutely. And I can give you the greatest example in the world. Children. They're born with the ability to communicate, but they need to be taught. Is that right? They need to be taught words. They need to be taught sounds. They need to be taught grammar and language. They need to be taught what to say, and they need to be taught when to say it. Is that right? They learn in their ability to hear God. You know, if we said we're going to have a class on prayer, you say that's I need that. And even the disciples said, teach us to pray. But let me remind you that hearing God is the second half of prayer. Because if you can't hear God, why would you pray? Now, one reason is to make our requests and petitions be known to God. But God never intended prayer to be a giving of our to-do list to Him every morning. He intended prayer to be communication between a father and his children. And if you'll just take some time and start to listen, you'll be amazed that He'll speak. But most of us do this. Now, I'm just giving you an analogy. It's like someone's going to call you on the phone and talking for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then hanging up before you ever have a chance to say anything. That's the way many Christians pray. God, I need this, need this, need this, need this, need this. Gotta go. And God's thinking, would you like to hear what I have to say about that? I was having lunch with a man in our church. I texted him. They said, do you mind if I use your name? And he said, no, I don't. I think if it will help people, it's fine. His name is Eddie Gossage. So most of you men probably know him. He's the president of Texas Motor Speedway and part owner in 8 motor speedways around America. And he's a member of our church. And so we were having lunch, and he said, Pastor, there's something you could do to help me. And I said, sure. And he said, you talk a lot about, and God said this, and God said this, and God told me. And he said very seriously, I don't know how to hear God. Now, listen to me. Hearing God is not is not dependent upon knowledge or depth or wisdom. It's simply dependent upon being taught. Because we all need to learn. Children need to learn. So I told him, I want to tell you, and I'll go into more detail on this, but here's what I told him. I said, get alone with God every morning if you can. Turn on the worship CD, pray, let's speak to the Lord, then read in the Word, and then write down. Here's the best way if you want to start, the best, most practical way I know. Write down what you think God is saying to you through what you read that day. Mm-hmm. Just write down, I think God is saying to me through this verse, and just write it down.
That's the message today.
A few months later,